Hey, welcome to Devoted, and I hope and pray you're devoted to staying safe in the heat and maybe even staying cool. It is literally July, ain't it? I mean, this is the July, August I remember as a kid, hot and humid and sticky. So I hope and pray you're doing well in the heat. So this is going to be a little bit shorter, I think, because, well, it's just a shorter passage. And by far, probably the most weirdest of all the resuscitation stories. So if you remember, we've been looking at Hebrews 11, but we took a little detour a few weeks ago where we went on a country road, and that country road's been winding, and we'll come off of it here in a couple of weeks actually. But it's just, I thought it was fascinating because right there in Hebrews 11, I think it's 35a is where we stopped off, right? It says, and women, by faith, women receive back their dead. So that phrase, women receive back their dead, kind of harkens to at least asking the question, what stories are there in the Bible? How many stories are there in the Bible of people receiving back the dead? And so we've looked at most all of them. At the end of this, we'll have looked at most all of them. But we're still, of course, in the New Testament. We had several in the Old Testament, but we're here, this one at this most, probably the most, I hate to say famous, it's not famous. It's the most well-known place in Jesus' life. It's on Golgotha. It's on Calvary's Hill. This is where we see this miracle happening, all right? It's only in Matthew. It's very weird, very strange, about 3-4 verses, all right? So here it is. All these passages, they'll be on the screen. But Matthew 27, verse 50, starting verse 50. Then Jesus shouted out again, and he released his spirit. It's really important to know that Jesus was not killed, Jesus was not murdered, Jesus' life was not taken from him. Jesus laid his life down. So it really is important. This phrase is really important. He released his spirit. So he willingly gave up his life for us. He was not crucified, killed, murdered. He was nothing like that. He released his spirit. Only one who's able to do that. He released the spirit. At that moment, the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split apart. Now, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And the curtain being split from the top to bottom means the access to God is now free and accessible. The barrier that was between man and God, sin, is no longer, because the sin of the world was placed upon Jesus, the Messiah, who was just right there on the temple, or just right there on Calvary's Hill, looking at the temple. So there's the temple, right outside the city gates. There's Golgotha, and so you could see. And so, just an interesting juxtaposition. But this torn curtain represents the fact that now man had access thanks to Jesus, the mediator. Jesus was the one who was the in-between, right? So interesting, though, this is where it gets interesting. The earth shook, rocks split apart, I'm reading from the New Living Translation, and look at this in verse 52. And tombs opened. The bodies of many godly men and women who had died were raised from the dead. What? We'll come back to that. They left the cemetery after Jesus' resurrection, went into the holy city of Jerusalem, and appeared to many people. That's it. That's all we know. Crazy. I've studied this passage for years off and on. I've tried to figure out exactly what it means and all this. There are two theories, and really only two theories. Number one, they did rise from the dead at 3 o'clock on Friday. And crazily enough, they stayed either in their graves or they stayed in the cemetery till Sunday. Because it clearly says in verse 53, they left the cemetery after Jesus' resurrection. So Friday at 3, Sunday at 6 a.m. That's, in Jewish calendar, it's 3 full days. But for us, even that's like, that's a whole day on Saturday where you've got some dead people who are no longer dead walking around the cemetery, but they can't leave it. Now, there's some, I don't know again, I'll leave it to you to decide which one it might be. There's probably one I lean toward. This one seems to be pretty weird, pretty supernatural, and kind of just like, how in the world did dead people walk around in the cemetery? That had to create a stir, right? Now, the other option is, within that same option, is that they stayed in the graves until, so they were awake at 3 o'clock, but they stayed in their graves or their tombs until the morning, until Sunday morning, when maybe their tombs opened up as well. And that's a possibility too. That might be even more plausible than a bunch of formerly dead people now resuscitated. Remember the difference between resurrection and resuscitation. But now formerly dead people walking around the cemetery. Hey, Charles, what are you doing? I thought you were, why can't you come out? Oh, I can't come out. I don't know. That's just weird. I like that version because it's just weird enough where it's supernatural enough, right? And it's just this like, for me, it might fit this very, very weird weekend. The Son of God is dead. And yet, by the power of his death, you already see a foretaste. I'm going to say foretaste. A foretaste of glory divine, which is the resurrection. So the resuscitation points to the resurrection. It's not the resurrection yet. There's only one resurrection, Jesus. But these these resuscitations of these men and women, these saints of the Lord, right? Possibly point to, they do point to the resurrection of Jesus. The other option is this. This is why I mentioned the comma. Some scholars would say the earth shook, comma, and rocks split apart, period. Verse 52. And tombs opened, meaning the rocks split apart on Friday, the tombs opened on Sunday. That's plausible too. I got no problem with that one either. So the rocks, as the curtain was torn, the rocks were split. I get it. I love Charles Spurgeon's quote. We're going to hear two of Charles Spurgeon's quotes. Listen to this. Men's hearts did not respond to the agonizing cry of the dying Redeemer, but the rocks did respond. The rocks were torn and split. He did not die for rocks, yet rocks were more tender than the hearts of men for whom he shed his blood. Be sure that your heart is softer than a rock's. Wow. Make sure your heart's soft. Be devoted to a soft heart. That's the first one. Be devoted to a soft heart. Believe in miracles. Trust in the supernatural. And ask God to make sure that there's nothing hard in your heart. Hardening of arteries, ask any doctor. Ask any cardiologist. Hardening of arteries, not a good thing. Neither is it good in the spiritual realm. Don't let your heart get hard in the spiritual realm. Amen? And then this. So, if indeed that's the case, there's a period. The earth shook, rocks split apart, period. Verse 52, tombs opened. The bodies of many godly men and women who died were raised from the dead. They left the cemetery after Jesus' resurrection. So the context would be after Jesus' resurrection. Could it be that the rocks split on a Friday, the resuscitations happened on a Sunday morning? Absolutely. I'm fine with that. I've got no problem with that either. All I know is this. There is power in the death and life of Jesus. Jesus' death has power. Jesus' life has power. Amen? So be devoted to the power of both his death and his life. Be devoted to the power of both the death and the life of Jesus. Last quote from Charles Spurgeon. These first miracles wrought in connection with the death of Christ were typical of spiritual wonders that will be continued till he comes again. Meaning these miracles should continue to happen. Rocky hearts are broken open. Graves of sin are opened. Those who have been dead in trespasses and sins and buried in sepulchres of lust and evil are quickened and come out from among the dead. And then we all will go into that holy city, the New Jerusalem. Whatever it is, whichever theory you lean toward, I don't know if one has a better chance of it being right or not. I do know this. The bodies of many godly men and women, otherwise known as saints, were raised either on a Friday or a Sunday. But either way, they were raised because the power of the death and the life of Jesus. Amen? Be devoted to soft hearts. Be devoted to the power of the death and the life of Jesus Christ. Be blessed.